Hello everyone, welcome to week 3. We have 2 videos this week. One is about sampling and the other is about questionnaires. Probability-based sampling means that there is a mathematical likelihood of each person being selected from a population. We don't just select them for convenience reasons as we might with qualitative or non-probability based sampling. By selecting people for a mathematical likelihood, the true meaning of random, we can infer from our sample statistics to the population parameters. Without probability-based sampling, we cannot make inferences. To illustrate probability, I have 2 boxes, each with 20 marbles. In the first box are 10 dark blue and 10 light blue marbles. The chances of selecting a dark blue marble out of that box is 10 out of 20, which simplifies to 1 out of 2. In the second box, there are 15 light blue marbles and 5 dark blue marbles. The chance of selecting a dark blue marble is 5 out of 20, or 1 out of 4. This slide is an FYI about a term you may come across. It's called sampling with or without replacement. Using the box that has 10 dark blue and 10 light blue marbles, on the left, if I select one marble and the first one is dark blue, I can put that marble back, and the second time I select a marble, it's still a chance of 10 out of 20 that I'll have a dark blue marble. On the right, sampling without replacement, I have, in the first case, 10 light blue marbles, 9, let me scratch that. In the first case, I will have selected, let's say, a dark blue marble, taken it out of the box. I do not put it back. That means my second selection has a chance of 9 out of 20, not quite 1 out of 2, of being a dark blue marble. And my third selection, when I don't put the marbles back, I have an 8 out of 18 chance of selecting a dark blue marble. So mathematically, each marble has a different chance of selection. The reason I tell you this is because the formulas that software uses are based on sampling without replacement. Not because you really need to go into the formulae for this class, or even later on for that matter. You will have software. I want you to know something about this, but I don't want to go into further detail than you need for those of you who have not had a quantitative class especially. So probability is a proportion. It's a fraction that's, in the most simple sense, based on how many people we selected for the sample divided by the number of people in the population. That's called simple random sampling or single stage sampling. If I could randomly select kids from the state of Nebraska without worrying about what school they come from, I could say that that is simple random sampling. Reality is I'm probably going to need to select schools first and then select students. So I really will need multiple stage sampling more than likely. If I were to have a single stage, then I might need to reframe the population and say that my target population is not the state of Nebraska, rather it is the students in the particular school from which I'm sampling. If I select multiple schools, then I can talk about multiple stage sampling and infer to the broader population, let's say, of the state. Some terms you need to be aware of. Target population is all the people we want to make conclusions about, except that we never can access everybody we want. So the survey population is the group of people that we could potentially access. Sample frames are then what we use to select the people who will be in our sample. A sample frame ideally is a subset of a population. For example, list of students in all the schools in the state of Nebraska would be a sample frame if we wanted to study kids in Nebraska. The actual sample we select, the number of people we contact and invite to participate, that is the sample in one sense of the word. In another sense of the word, the sample becomes the people who agree to participate. And there are different terms that I'm not going to get into that distinguish these different levels of samples. Please know that everything needs to be a subset of what's above it. The sample is a subset of the frame. The frame ideally is a subset of the survey population, etc. A caution, very importantly, about sample frames. Any sample frame we choose will have sampling error in that there will be people in the frame who are not in the population and people in the population who are not in the frame. Let's say I want to study all the families who live in Omaha Public School District. If I use as a frame all the families who send their kids to Omaha Public Schools, I may have people who send their kids to Omaha schools but do not live in the district. So then I would have extra people in my frame who are not eligible for the population. And I would want to identify those people and then ideally not contact them. Or if I do, I would want to exclude them after the fact. I would want to verify that they live in Omaha. So there is another concern that I mentioned, and that is inaccessible members of the population. They may be homeless, they may live in groups, they may be incarcerated or live in dorms. People who live in dorms are not as likely to be inaccessible as the other groups, but they may be, depending on the population of your study and the sample frame that you use. You may have students who go to school out of state, and then you could end up with a problem there. There's two ways to handle these problems. One is to acknowledge them and be explicit about it. We need to do that in the case of people who are incarcerated because we should not be contacting them. Another thing we can do, using homeless people as an example, is to try and access them. Perhaps either with an additional sample frame or with an alternative sample frame. If I am studying homeless children in Chicago and I use school district rosters as my frame, then there possibly could be families who don't send their kids to school who are homeless. They might not send their kids because they are homeless. So it would be a good idea to access homeless kids through a soup kitchen in addition to or instead of using a public school roster. Likely, I'm going to say in addition to. So, one other point before I leave. At some stage, you will need to tangibly select participants for your study. And you're not just going to do that eeny, meeny, miny, moe on a piece of paper. You will have an electronic software package that you are using. I've showed here Excel because I imagine you are all familiar with Excel. I would recommend that you do this in SPSS, but some of you have not seen SPSS yet. So I simply leave you with a link to basic sampling processes in SPSS. But for example, in Excel, we have here 26 rows that we can visibly see. 2 through 6 are rows that represent actual people. If this were our sampling frame, we could use something like the Excel equals rand between formula and tell Excel to choose a number between 2 and 26. And then the number it identifies we would use as our first participant. And we could do that again for the second participant, and so on. Really, we would not want to do that on an individual participant basis because we would end up sampling with replacement, and we would then have to worry about possible duplicate selections. Please feel free to contact me if you want more detail. Also, I would be glad to help you if there are things you don't understand. I can help you distinguish between whether or not you need to understand it at this stage of the game. The only thing you need to do for this course is to indicate on your prospectus whether you're going to use single or multiple stage sampling, sort of the broad approach you will use. You'll read about cluster sampling and stratified sampling, and I would like you to indicate that as well on your prospectus, but you do not need to tell me which software package you would use or how you would select actual people. I do ask you also to identify a sampling frame, and it may be simply that you do so conceptually, saying I would use the list of people who send their families to my school district, but you don't need to actually obtain a sample frame for this course. But at any rate, I am happy to guide you in figuring out what you do and do not need to know regards to sampling and the reading you do this week. I will see you shortly for the second video. Bye-bye.